Hi everyone, Mike here. Just thought I'd do a video about operating the AI for battles of Napoleonic Europe. So what I'm going to try and do here is just work through some of the more common AI instructions, quite a few of them, and just sort of clarify exactly how it works. Fairly confident that the rules are reasonably straightforward, but I do appreciate that it sometimes helps just to see things in action, just to confirm how things work. There are a few things I just want to point out. First of all, mostly highlighted in red in the AI units section, which starts at page 21. So first of all, at the top it says the AI generally uses the same basic move, square and attack rules as a player, so that's quite important. So it says, for example, any move instruction is ignored if the AI unit is engaged in battle or in square formation, because just like the player, if your unit is engaged or in square formation, then it cannot move. So you would therefore, when operating the AI, you would, even if the instruction said to move, you would ignore that if it was engaged or in square formation. So bear those in mind as you go through. Also, down here in red, it says that you should stop going through the AI flow chart once it has performed one of the instructions in part or in full. So as it says here, that means it has actually moved or rolled some dice to perform an attack, or changed formation as well, I should add to that, I guess. As soon as it does something, then it's on its last instruction. So it will finish that instruction. If there's a second part to it, it'll try and do that, but it will then end its activation as soon as it's done something. There are then some bullet points here. There's some general rules, it says, that apply to the AI activation instructions. Again, bottom of page 21, that. So it's worth just having a look at those 5 bullet points and probably just reminding yourself of those maybe each time you play for the first few runs that you have. So it says here that parts of an instruction after a colon are only performed if the first part of the instruction was performed in full or part. That's usually a move followed by an attack, so it won't do the attack part of an instruction. If that attack comes after a move, it will only do that attack if it has moved, for example, or changed formation or something. Any information in square brackets is for tie-break purposes only, so ignore that information until you need it, because the AI has more than one option under the basic instruction. So just be a bit careful with that, don't jump straight into the square brackets. If the AI is instructed to attack, but because of the modifiers it wouldn't actually roll any dice for that attack, then on that occasion it will move on to any other targets it may have. So for example, if it's told to attack the nearest enemy, but for whatever reason it wouldn't be rolling any dice against that enemy, maybe that enemy's in cover or whatever, in trees or something, then it would move on to the next nearest enemy and try to attack that enemy instead, until it finds one that it can roll dice for. Once it's rolled dice, it's deemed to have performed an attack, and therefore it wouldn't do any more than that. When the instructions talk about going up the map, down the map, left or right, that's always from the player's perspective, so there's no need to sort of start imagining yourself sat in the AI's chair or anything. Just deal with it as you see it. So moving left means move left, moving right means move to your right, and so on, even though it's the AI that's doing it. And cavalry units will always try to move up to their maximum move distance, which is 2 hexes, unless it's otherwise stated. So unless the instruction says only move 1 hex, then it will always try to move its full distance if possible. It won't always be possible, but it will try at least. What else we got here? Another red section here says whenever a unit is required to move nearer to something in this game, it will only move if by doing so it reduces the distance between itself and its target. Okay, and that means the sort of direct distance as the crow flies, not not sort of winding round other units and so on. So count the number of hexes between the AI and the target unit that it's moving towards, and then only move it if it can actually move such that it reduces the actual distance between itself and that target unit. And then probably finally, just before we get on to some examples, it says here that when looking for a target to move towards, the AI will work out under the instruction which target unit that is to move towards. If it then cannot move towards it for whatever reason, because it's blocked in by its own units or something, then it simply will not move, and that instruction, is ignored. It won't then start targeting to different units as it might with an attack. Okay, so there's a difference there. It will pick, for example, the nearest unit, if that's what the instruction says, the nearest player unit. It will try to move towards it. If it can't, then the move simply fails, and it won't then look for another target to move towards, at least not under that instruction. It will move to the next instruction. Otherwise, you find that the AI will end up, trying to move towards units which are right, across the other side of the board or something, and that just makes a mess of what the AI is trying to do. So quite an important one, that in there. And again, it's in red, so they're all sort of red tinted, those most important instructions, so do have a look at those. Okay, remember the AI for each map, for each battle is different, but there are some common instructions. There's a list of instructions I've got here, a sort of page and a bit of instructions that I'm going to work through in this video very quickly. There probably are some others, but once you've got your head around these basic ones, you can fathom the rest very easily. They're just variations of the same theme. So let's start with the artillery then, first of all. So I'm going to use this map. I've got another map underneath, I need it, but I think this will probably do the trick. So let's stick an AI artillery unit on the board. So the first thing artillery will tend to do in most of these battles is attack. It says attack the nearest, so we simply find the nearest player unit within range and line of sight, of course. Remember, artillery only fire along straight lines of hexes, so for example in this example, the nearest unit that it could attack would be this cavalry unit here, because it is the only unit which is actually in line of sight and within range here. Okay. Similarly, if that was there and that was there, that would still be the nearest unit in line of. Hang on, it'd still be the nearest unit in line of sight, because it can't see this unit because of this town. But it can see this unit through the trees, albeit with a reduced dice roll for it. Okay, so that would be the nearest. It would then work out whether it can actually roll any dice. I suspect because of these trees it wouldn't, and therefore it would then find the next nearest, which would be this one, but it can't see that because it's not in line of sight, so then it can't see them, so it probably wouldn't attack, but you get the point. Okay, so it's the nearest unit in line of sight and within range. In terms of movement, most often the artillery will do one of these two things: move horizontally downwards. Okay, now horizontally downwards means, obviously downwards means down the map, so that would be one of these three hexes, but horizontally downwards means there or there. Okay, that's vertically downwards. So horizontally in this game means you're crossing into a column next to you, and vertically means up and down the same column. Okay, that's explained in the rules. So horizontally downwards always means just there or there. So there's just the two options. Okay, now this instruction is often followed by these words, which says, but only to put an enemy unit in range and line of sight. So we'll only move there if it would then have an enemy in range or line of sight. That wouldn't be in range or line of sight because of this town again, but that would now, as would that. So that would be a valid move. If it moved there, it would have that one in range of line of sight, so it could also move there, although obviously that wouldn't actually be there because otherwise it would have attacked under the first instruction. So let's take that one out to make it more realistic. So for example here, it would first try to attack the nearest. It can't because that's not in, it's got none of them in line of sight. The town blocks that. This one would then want to try and move downwards horizontally, so it could move there or there. As I say, that one's fine because it puts it in range and line of sight of those two. That one doesn't put it in range and line of sight of any unit, so it would automatically go that way. Okay, remember the square brackets are tiebreakers, so if both moves put it into range and line of sight then of a unit, then you would look at TB1, which is table 1, tiebreaker 1 I should say, and then tells you which hex to move to. So then we're looking for tracking our way through this, which is fairly straightforward. Okay, under that instruction, note that if neither of those two things got it into range or line of sight, so if that one doesn't and that one doesn't in this example, then it would not move at all under that. Another common instruction for artillery is to move straight down, and that literally means move down the column like that, and only that. Okay, if it can't do that because that's blocked, then it won't do it. There are no conditions on this note, it just says move straight down. So if it's an empty hex in front of it, it will simply move straight down there. Okay. Now, there are tactical reasons behind a lot of these instructions. Okay, in specific battles, the instructions are there to make the AI work in a certain way. So I'm not going to sort of explain all the reasoning behind that, because that's part of the game is working out, how the AI works and what it tries to do, the tactics it's trying to use in each battle and so on. So I'm not going to sort of go into that, but there are reasons behind it. So that's artillery, fairly straightforward. I think there might be another one or two instruction variations on these things, such as they might have turn limits or something. I'll explain those later. There may be some way you're just moving horizontally downwards to the right, in which case it would only ever move like that. And again, if that's the instruction, then it will do it if it can. Or it might say move horizontally down to the right, but only to put somebody in range or line of sight. So again, it would only do that if it was then putting a unit into range and line of sight. Remember, okay, range and line of sight. In other words, in a position to potentially fire on the next turn at a unit. So that's the artillery, reasonably straightforward, I think. Cavalry, probably one of the trickiest units to operate, although again, not too bad, I hope. Let's stick a AI cavalry unit on the board. Remember, the trick with these for movement is to remember that they will try to move the maximum number of hexes if they can. In other words, 2 hexes if at all possible. So again, the cavalry will usually start with an attack order, so simply attack a player unit if they are adjacent to them. And that has an order because the AI cavalry can only attack units which are adjacent to them, so it jumps straight into this order and tells you to attack the commander, then the infantry, then the AR, then the artillery, then the cavalry, and that would always have a TB2 after it. Actually hasn't on this bit I've typed up here, but it would always have TB2, which would be the tiebreaker 2 table, which then tells you what to do in the event of having 2 units of the same type next to you. Okay, if you ever run out of tiebreakers, then you simply decide randomly by allocating numbers on a die and rolling, but that doesn't happen very often, fortunately. AI generally knows what it's doing. Okay, so some common cavalry orders. This one here says select the nearest enemy furthest up. Okay, so in this case, for example, if we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, like that. It says select the nearest enemy furthest up, move nearer to it. So you take the orders in parts. So the first bit says select the nearest enemy. So that's all we're doing. Remember, ignore the bit in square brackets until we need it. So select the nearest enemy. There are 2 enemies here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. They're both 4 hexes away. If one was nearer, then obviously it would select, I should say, the one that is the nearest. Okay, because these are both the same distance away, then we look at the square bracket tiebreaker, and that says furthest up. So we'd then select this unit here because it's further up the map than this unit here. Okay, again, if it was a tie, we would be deciding that randomly because there is no reference to any other tiebreakers there, just the unit that's furthest up. So that's one occasion where you might have to just allocate numbers and roll. Again, doesn't happen as much as you might think. Then it will move nearer to it. Okay, so in this case, it's selected this unit, it will move nearer to it. So it needs to remember, reduce the number of hexes between it and that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, it's 4 hexes away. Okay, so to reduce the number of hexes, it could move either to, let me get a few cubes over here. It could move either here or here. Okay, that's the only 2. They are the only 2 hexes that will take it nearer to this infantry unit. And with cavalry, you take it 1 hex at a time. Okay, you can't sort of say, oh, but hang on, it could move there, which is near, or it could move there because that it's got 2 movement hexes. It doesn't work like that. You do each movement separately. So you do the first potential hex movement and then the second potential hex movement. So at the moment, we're thinking it just moves 1 hex to start with. The only way of getting nearer are those 2 hexes. Okay, so if one of those was blocked by a unit, then it would have to go into the other one, wouldn't have a choice. Okay, so we're moving nearer to it. If there is a choice, as there is here, then we look at the tie break. Now in brackets here, in square brackets here, there's a V, which means it will prefer to move vertically if possible. And vertically, remember, means up and down the same column, so it would actually move to that one, okay, because that's still taking it nearer. It was 4 hexes away, it's now 3 hexes away. But that moves it vertically. That, remember, is a horizontal move because it's going across columns. Vertically means up or down the same column, so it would move there out of choice. But again, if there was a unit there blocking it, then it would still move, but it would move there. Even though it prefers to move vertically, that doesn't mean it won't move horizontally. It just means on a tie break, you know, if there is a choice, then you go vertically. Okay, these are just tie breaks at this point, remember. And then if that doesn't help, then you would look at TB1 again, the movement tie break chart, and it would tell you which hex to move into. That's usually more of a problem, well, that's only really a problem when moving more sort of across. So for example, there. If this was moving towards this unit, then again, it would have 2 options to move, which would be there and there, both of which take it nearer to this infantry unit. And again, this time it prefers to move vertically, but none of those are vertical movements. They're both horizontal movements. In that case, you would consult TB1 and table 1. The first bit that applies on there would be the 4th one down, which says choose the hex that's not in a river. So the cavalry would move there. Okay, and then you do the second move, and again just do the same thing. So just work out which hexes it can move into that take it nearer. In that case, because it's in line with the infantry, there is now only 1 hex which actually takes it nearer. Okay, these 2 hexes here do not take it nearer, they keep it the same distance away, which is 3 hexes, so they don't work. You remember, it has to move nearer, so it only has that choice. So you don't need the tie break, even though the tie break says it prefers to move vertically. It doesn't matter here because it's only got 1 choice. So it will move there on its second move, even though it's into a river hex. This next example of cavalry says, if the turn is greater than 2, then select the nearest infantry furthest up, move nearer to it vertically, table 1, blah, blah, blah. In other words, exactly the same instruction as the one before. However, I've put this one in here simply to highlight the fact that sometimes there are turn limits. So your turn counter down here will be moving up the turns. This unit would only do that instruction if the turn is greater than 2. In other words, it's on 3 or higher. Okay, so the turn is greater than 2. So you look at the turn counter just to decide that. Is the turn counter greater than 2? So being on turn 2 is not enough. You have to be on turn 3 or greater. Okay, and that's usually a delaying tactic on the part of the AI. So, we'll suddenly become more aggressive after turn 2. On some later examples, we'll see that, sometimes after turn 6, units will start doing things, for example, because they've got to, go and chase objectives down or whatever. And if they haven't got them by then, they start panicking and flooding it more with units than they perhaps were earlier on, when they might be more cautious and so on. Another example here, select nearest enemy infantry, furthest up, move nearer to it, vertically, table 1, and attack. That is slightly different, seems the same, but this time it says select nearest enemy infantry. So you've got to be a little bit careful, read these things carefully, okay? So in that case, that specific case, the cavalry is going to move towards the nearest infantry. So even if there were other units around like that, it will always select the nearest infantry, and then it will try to move nearer to it. Okay, now in this case, moving nearer to it, it prefers to move vertically, so it'll move down there. It could move there, of course, because that cuts the distance between them. You ignore other units, remember, it's just as the crow flies. So that and that would both take it nearer. Prefers to move vertically, so it would move there. It then wouldn't be able to move on its second move because it's now engaged in battle with the commander. And when it comes to attack here, it would then attack the commander. So it can still get into combat with other units, but it was originally aiming to move nearer to that unit. So just got to read those carefully. There aren't too many of those, but just watch out for them when they appear. Next one says, if no enemy infantry remain, move nearer to the objective. Actually, I think that's the second part of this order, actually. So it's in the same thing. So it's kind of an either or here. So you either move nearer towards the enemy infantry, or if there are no enemy infantry, then you move nearer to the objective. So simply, you know, say the objective here was this town here, Poccovello, then you would select this objective, and that would then move nearer to it. So again, it would be one of those two hexes. It prefers to move vertically, so again it would move down there, again it would get engaged in battle, and again it would attack the commander under the second part of that instruction, and wouldn't be able to move its second move. Another example here, if turn is greater than 2, select the nearest furthest up enemy. Again, we're selecting the enemy based on what is nearest, and the tiebreaker is what's furthest up. We're going to move nearer to it, and we're going to move nearer to it horizontally this time. So that's slightly different. So the only difference there is its preference in the tie break means it's going to move horizontally. So again, if it's moving towards say the commander being the nearest unit, then it could move there or there, but because it prefers to move horizontally this time, it will move that way rather than vertically downwards. So that's really just about different tie breakers to look out for. We've got to move nearer to the objective. Again, just select the objective wherever that is and move nearer to it. And again, in this case, if that is the objective, there are two options for it. It prefers to move, in this case, vertically, so it will move to there. On its second move, it can only move there, so it will move into there. Okay, because that's the only way of getting nearer to this objective. That's the same instruction, move nearer to the objective, but this time it prefers to move horizontally. So it would, in the same case, this time it would go across there horizontally, and then again horizontally, because it's moving across columns to get near. Only when it got there would it have to go vertically into there. Okay, and again, sometimes the cavalry has, like the artillery did, a move straight down option. So in that case, again, it will move either 1 or 2 hexes depending on what's the situation is. Obviously, if there were, if it was here and there was a unit there and an enemy unit, it would move 1 straight down, then it would get engaged in battle, and then it would attack. If it was there, it would move 2 down and then attack under the second part of that instruction. If it was there and they had an AI unit there, it would go there and then stop, because the instruction is move straight down. There's no option for it here to move horizontally in any kind of way. So it just moves straight down the column and then stops. Can't make its second move because it's blocked. And similarly, if it was there, it wouldn't move at all under that instruction, because it just can't do what it's being asked to do. So that's cavalry. Infantry, let's have a look at them. So let's get an infantry unit on the board. Not too dissimilar in many cases to cavalry. Obviously, you only move 1 hex at a time. A couple of slightly different things at the start here. When the AI is being more defensive in some of these battles, it will often go into square formation. This says if in square, so if it was in square formation, we had a sort of square marker next to it, and there were no enemy cavalry within 3 hexes, so let's put a bit of cavalry and stuff on here. Okay, so in that situation, for example, then it will d-square. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there's no cavalry within 3 hexes, and therefore it will d-square. So it'll come out of square back into line formation. And then it will try to attack the nearest unit. So for example, if there was an infantry there, it would then attack this infantry unit because that's in range and line of sight. 3 hexes. If this instruction here it says if not in square, so this is not in square, and there is an enemy cavalry within 3 hexes, or there is here, then this will go into square formation. Okay, remember that's a formation which is usefully defensive against cavalry attack. So what it's really doing is getting ready for this cavalry to charge into them, or at least trying to deter them from doing so, which it can do once it gets to 3 away, because it moves 2, it can obviously charge them. So goes into square, then it attacks the nearest unit. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. These are the same. So then you would look into the square brackets of the tiebreaker. It will prefer to attack the commander, then artillery, then cavalry. So it'll actually attack this cavalry. It prefers that before this infantry. If it cannot roll any dice for this cavalry because it loses dice for being in square and it loses dice for these trees, then it would try to attack this infantry unit as the second option. Okay, remember, if it can't roll any dice at all, it will attack this. It won't attack the strongest. It won't attack with its strongest firepower. It may well be that if it was rolling 1 die against this, it may roll 2 dice against these. But you don't have to think about that. Just do what the instruction says. Okay, it says to attack the nearest, and it prefers cavalry. So if it can roll any dice at all against this, then it will, and that's the attack over with. Infantry again usually start with a basic instruction of attack the nearest. So they will again attack the nearest unit with that basic opening, usually opening instruction. Sometimes these square instructions are before that. 1 or 2 other instructions can appear before it, but often it will start with this. Attack the nearest, and again, well, this time in square brackets, there is a tie break position, okay, because infantry, of course, don't always need a tie break because they're firing a range. Then they can have more than 1 unit in range, but 1 can be the nearest, so they may not need a tie break. They'll simply attack the nearest unit. In square brackets, there is a tiebreaker in case there are 2 units which are the same distance away, so they're both the nearest. Then we look into the square brackets to work out which one we want. And again, here it says, in fact, though, this time it says infantry before cavalry, so we'll actually attack the infantry in that situation. Okay, again, in square brackets, these things do differ depending on which battle you're playing, which unit, which instruction you're following, and so on. So you always check this order of tie break very carefully. Next example: if the objective is vacant, move nearer to it. So just like we saw with the cavalry, again, assuming this is the objective here, then if that's vacant, meaning nobody's on it, obviously, then it will move nearer to it. That's usually an instruction that appears where the AI is defending an objective, so usually somewhere up nearer to its end of the map, but let's use this one anyway. So it's it's trying to keep units on there as best as possible. All right, but note, you only do what it says. So if the objective is vacant, move nearer to it. Okay, if this objective is not vacant because there's already a unit in there, then it won't do anything under this instruction. It won't still move nearer to it or move somewhere else or think about what else it's doing. You don't have to think about what the rationale's behind this order. Just do what it says. Okay? You don't have to. You have to think about how the rule, what the rules are saying, but you don't have to think about their strategy or tactics. Okay, you play your game. The AI will play its game, and trust me, you'll get a decent game out of it just by doing what it says. Okay, so in this case, in that case, you would ignore this order if that's the objective, because the objective is not vacant. The same would apply if my unit was in there, but I suspect in most games where this order appears, I've probably won by getting my unit in there. So usually it'll be an AI unit that's in there. Another variation of that might tell you the actual town name. So this one says, for example, if Vimero is vacant, move nearer to it. And again, the same thing applies there. If it's not vacant, then that instruction will not kick in and will not active. That unit will not move nearer to it. Okay, Vimero is obviously on a different map. If not already on a high ground hex, select an adjacent vacant high ground hex. Okay, so again, just got to read these nice and carefully. All right. So if this unit was here, then it says if not already on a high ground hex. So straight away we know that if this unit was on a high ground hex, this instruction does not apply. Okay, I won't do any more of that because there's a condition to it. Okay, if not already on a high ground hex. If it is on a high ground hex, you ignore that particular condition. Now, a lot of these instructions don't relate to this map, so they'll make far more sense when you see the maps that they do relate to. So if this unit was here, it says if not already on a high ground hex, well, it's not. Select an adjacent vacant high ground hex. So here we've got 2 of those. Okay, these are both vacant adjacent high ground hexes. And then it's got in the tiebreaker it says nearest to the objective. So we would then take the one. So if this was the objective, we would then select this hex because it's nearest to the objective. So it would move into there. If the objective was, say, here, or more likely say here, for example, then you would go on to the next tiebreaker, which says furthest down. So you would take the hex which was furthest down the map, which is this one. So this unit would move into here. And if neither of those helped, say we were in this position here, yeah, it's tricky actually to get this exactly right. Yeah, it's tricky to get that exactly right actually, but unless we could probably put a unit there. So this would then have maybe this and this to move into. No, we can't really do this on here, but what we're saying is if for some, if somehow, say the hex it's on there is not a high ground hex, and it had a choice of two that, were high ground hexes, and they were both the same distance down, they're both as near to the objective as each other. So in other words, as a tie break, then it tells you to go to table 1. And again, that will tell you which hex to move into. So always, these things are always sorted out by the tiebreakers. Just read them carefully and follow them in order. If it does move, then it can attack as the second part of its order. Something else the infantry will often do is move straight down, just like we saw with the cavalry. So again, they'll move straight down, just one hex. Remember, if the hex in front of them is vacant, they'll move into it, regardless of what it is. Whether it's a river, town, hills or trees, they'll just move into it. And then they'll try to attack the nearest unit in that instruction. There's another one here, it says move straight down, but not if it results in the unit moving from a high ground hex to a non-high ground hex. Okay, so that, again, this is a very specific one on a couple of maps where perhaps the AI defending hills. So for example, it would say there, it would be there. In fact, let's put it there and work through this. So it says move straight down, but not if it results in the unit moving from high ground to non-high ground. Okay, so that would be okay because it's moving from low ground to high ground. That would be okay, it would do it there because it's moving from high ground to high ground, but it wouldn't move there because that's from high ground to low ground. Okay, so this is often an instruction where perhaps the AI is starting behind hills and the instruction is to get them up and to the front of hills so they can fire at the oncoming players' units and use the high ground without actually stepping off that high ground and losing that high ground bonus. So you'll see that in some of the maps, some of the battles. Move horizontally down to the right. Okay, so very specific instruction there. Move horizontally down to the right. Again, that's my right, of course. It would be there and there only. Okay, like that. And then try to attack the nearest unit. Okay. If it can't move down to the right, it won't move at all, and therefore it can't try the attack. So we'll move on to the next order if there is one. Select the nearest enemy furthest up. Move nearer to it. So we covered this really in the cavalry. It's more or less the same thing. Okay, so again we're going to select the nearest unit. So here we go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. So these two are the nearest units, this cavalry and infantry. And the tiebreaker is to select the units furthest up, which is his cavalry. Then it says move nearer to it, preferring vertical moves. Well, the only way to get nearer to it is to move there. Okay, that doesn't get it nearer, that doesn't get it nearer. That's a horizontal move, but it doesn't matter because we don't need a tiebreak. It's only the one choice, so we'll move into that hex. And then it will attack the nearest, and the nearest unit would then be this cavalry. Although it couldn't see it, of course, because this town blocks line of sight. So we could then try one of these. Can't see that one either because of the plateau effect of this hill here, but we can see this unit, so they would actually end up attacking this infantry unit here. Move nearer to the objective. It's the same again as the cavalry, so this is the objective, we just move nearer to it. And again, if he's there is no choice, it's just that. But if he was, say, here, he would be able to move into that one or that one. And again, the tiebreak is vertical, so he prefers to move vertically, so he would actually move into that hex. Then he'll try to attack the nearest unit again. Or the same thing here, move nearer to the objective, prefer horizontally, so in that case he would move horizontally first. Okay, and then the next time he would have to move down there if he got the same instruction 3 times in a row. Okay, and the final infantry instruction to look down is just move straight down, then attack the nearest. I've already had that one. I have, I think, yes. So again, obviously just move straight down if you can, and then attack the nearest. Okay, then let's have a look at the commander instruction. So let's get an AI commander out. Okay, now the commanders in this game will usually hover around the back of troops. So let's get a few units on the board if we can, just to make this a little bit more realistic. Okay, let's have a look. So often the first command, just like other your first instruction, I should say, just like other units, is to try to attack. So he will again try to attack anything, but because it's a cavalry unit, it can only be adjacent units. So again, it jumps straight into the order. If there's more than one adjacent, then you prefer infantry, cavalry, commander, artillery in that order. And table 2 helps out if there is a choice of the same type of unit. So if he's adjacent to 2 infantry units, then the table will help with that. Another instruction picked out from one of the commander missions, or the commander instructions in one of the battles, says if the objective is vacant, move nearer to it. Again, just like the cavalry and so on, he'll do that. So again, if this was the objective, then he'll move nearer to it. The tie break for him is to move adjacent to most friendly units. Okay, so if he was there, then he will try to move nearer to this. If this is the objective, let's assume this is the objective, this town, then it says if the objective is vacant, which it is, move nearer to it. I can move nearer to it by moving there or there. Okay, but the tiebreaker says adjacent to most friendly units. So clearly he would move there because it's adjacent to 2 friendly units, whereas there it's 0. So he'll move there. Okay, and then on his second move, he will move there. Because it's the only way of getting nearer to it. Okay. And then he'll try to attack if he's adjacent to anyone at that point. Again, that instruction is quite specific to specific maps with specific objectives and so on. This is the most common commander instruction. Select a vacant adjacent hex. Okay, so although it can move twice, this instruction is only saying move 1 hex because it's asking us to select a vacant adjacent hex. Okay, so we've got quite a few here. All these hexes here. Yeah, they're vacant and they're adjacent. Okay, 5 hexes. We've got 5 options. Okay, select a vacant adjacent hex. Okay, done. But it says which is itself adjacent to more friendly units than the commander is now. Okay, so, well, the commander is adjacent to 0 friendly units. So we need to pick out the adjacent hexes which are adjacent to more than 0 friendly units. And we can see straight away that it's those 2 hexes there. Okay, this one is adjacent to the cavalry, this one is adjacent to the infantry and cavalry. And the tiebreaker says most friendly units. So in fact, under this instruction, he would move here because that gets him adjacent to the most friendly units. Okay, and there's another tiebreak that says furthest up. So if there were a couple of hexes that were both adjacent to 1 or 2, maximum most units, and they were the same, then you would move to the hex that's furthest up the map, and again refer to table 1 for other tiebreakers as needed. And then he will move into that and then try to attack any adjacent unit. What this instruction is trying to do is clearly get the commander to be adjacent to as many of its own units as he can, because remember the commander gives a bonus to units which are adjacent to it. So that's what it's trying to do. But again, we don't need to worry about the rationale behind the instruction. Just do exactly what it says here. Okay. So if, for example, the commander was in that situation, then it wouldn't move here, because that hex is not adjacent to more units than he currently is. He's already adjacent to 1 unit, but so is that hex, so he won't move in that situation, whereas that situation he would, and he would move there again, because there he was adjacent to 1 unit, there he's adjacent to 2. Once you get a hang of that, it's really dead easy to see. You can just see it straight away. You can straight away you look at that and think, yeah, he's adjacent to 2, he can only get adjacent to 2, he's not going to move. Whereas, you look at that and think, yeah, it's adjacent to 2, but he can move there clearly, and it's adjacent to 3. That's 2, so you're going to move in there. So yeah, it just becomes very obvious where he's going to move after a few run-throughs. You'll get used to that. So that's a very common one. A lot of the battles start with that as is the first one. And then the commander often has time-restricted instructions. So, for example, it might say if the turn counter is greater than 7, so that would only be from turn 8 onwards, move nearer to the objective. So again, that's obviously one where the AI is perhaps trying to take an objective, the commander will generally be hanging back, supporting units in this way. But when it gets to turn 8, if if they haven't yet achieved that, then the commander's probably going to think, right, okay, now it's time for me to actually just go and try and get the objective because time's running out. No point sitting back waiting for things to happen. If T is greater than 6, in that case, so from turn 7 onwards, move 1 hex straight up, which means exactly what it says. It's not a misprint. It means he's going to move up the map like that, and I guess that's probably from a defensive type battle, probably one where the commander is trying to stay alive. There are some, where the player has to eliminate the enemy commander, so it may well be that, from turn 7 they're sort of backing away, just getting as far away as possible. If T is greater than 5 and Vimiro is vacant, move nearer to it. Again, that's from a specific battle where the objective will be to take Vimiro in some way, or at least prevent the player from doing so. So again, there comes a point in the battle, this time turn 6 onwards, where the commander decides to get involved. The rest of those instructions are just as we've seen already. Moving straight up, it will only move straight up in that instruction. If it can't do that because there's a unit behind it, then it won't move. And again, if it wants to move nearer to Vimiro, then it will only move if it can get nearer to that particular town. Let's assume that's Vimiro there. It can only move there or there in that instance. For its first move, and the tiebreaker says horizontally, so it'll go that way, and then it can only move there and there for its second move. So again, tiebreaker says that way. All right. And then it will try to attack any that are adjacent to it. All right. Now remember, the basic structure of the AI instructions usually means that they will try to attack. They might do something else before that, might try to do something else before that. If they can't do that, just ignore it. Then they'll usually try to attack. If they can't attack, then they might try to do something else. But what usually happens, not so much with the commander, but with the other units, is you end up in a dice roll situation where you roll a die, and that tells you what they will try to do. At that point, if they can't do the instruction that you roll, you do not re-roll the die. Okay, that's it. They just end their activation if they cannot do that. So you work through these instructions in order from top to bottom for each unit, and as soon as they perform at least part of an order or instruction, you stop at that point. Okay, so if this unit gets a move straight down order and then attack, then the fact that it's moved straight down means it's activated. It will then try to attack because that's part of the same instruction. But if it can't attack, it won't, and then it just ends its activation there. Okay, the fact that it didn't attack doesn't matter because it's already moved, therefore it's performed something. Okay, so we're always looking for the AI to do something, but once you get to the dice roll, if it can't do that, then that's the last step. You don't re-roll the die. Okay, folks, I hope that helps. Feel free to put questions in the comments if you have any. Cheers.